Folks, we take this stuff seriously here, and that pledge is particularly important because part of that pledge, a statement on that pledge, is it says that I will not vote against wise and well-directed bills that protect the life and innocence of all children. And this issue that we just covered in the first half of the show is particularly frustrating, and because we do pass bills, and then you have this nonsense that still continues, and I don't understand why people push back on it. They are pushing back on normal civilization. Things that have been normal for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, boys and girls, men and women. And as a man, it is our duty, and this may offend some of you, but it is our duty to protect women. To protect our girls. That is our duty. It's just within me. I can't stop but not want to protect my wife and my daughter. To teach my boys that they will do the same. And so that's why we look for legislators who will follow that pledge, who will sign that pledge and say, I'll do that. I'll get behind all that stuff. And when we talked about protecting the innocence of children, we need to do it wise and well-directed. And I think this morning is a perfect example of what I think was a well-intended bill, but I do not think it was wise, and it certainly wasn't well-directed. So let's get into some of this. It was Senate Bill 1158. This is a bill that has come through the Senate, I think the last 2 years, maybe 3, and it hasn't gotten through. But let's set you up here. This bill, you can read it there, is a mobile device, the native browser filter activation for minors. So basically what this bill is seeking to do is to compel companies like Apple and Samsung and Google that if they're selling their phones and a parent comes in to buy a phone or a device for their child, that they are required to give it to the parent with the filters, the parental control filters turned on so that you can give it to the child. The issue with this is that the filter only works on the native browser on the phone. It doesn't cover any of the other apps that are on there or any other apps that you can download. It's simply for the native browser, the internet search browser that's on there. And so that's what it does. But let's listen to Senator Cook, who was the sponsor of this bill in the Senate. Let's listen to him close out the argument here after the hearing today. We like to do the closing arguments because sometimes that's where they kind of piece it all together in a quicker way rather than listening to their 16-minute opening speech. So let's listen to that.
Senator Kevin Cook, Legislative District 32. So as you heard here, we had a lot of money outside of Idaho talking. Let me just point out one of them that I thought was very interesting. One of them mentioned that he was against my bill or against 1158. He said we should support the age verification bill, which I 110% support because we need something at every technology stack, every level. But the thing that you might not know is that very company is the company that is challenging the Texas law, the Texas age verification bill in the courts right now. And yet he stood up and said, you need to be using this one and not the filter. So, the hypocrisy that is involved with our children is astounding to me. We heard about the Constitution. This is based off of the Constitution. The Supreme Court said filters. It's the closest thing to the individual person. They recommend doing filters. Some of them mentioned about that it was unconstitutional because it was blocking adults. That is false. It does not block the adults. They still get their free-flowing morning cup of pornography if that's what they want. If you, like me, got probably 300 emails over last night talking about if you pass this, you are putting our guns in jeopardy. On January 26, 2025, we had a young lady by the age of 26 take her Mercedes-Benz into the Eagles fans who were celebrating. They just won the Washington Commanders and gave them a right to go to play in the Super Bowl. She plowed in and into.
Okay, let's come out of this
with their Mercedes.
Let's come out of this and go on for forever here on this topic. One of the arguments was like if we start suing the manufacturer of the device, right? Like if you're upset that if you find out that your child is watching pornography, and you want to sue Apple for that, or do you want to sue the distributor of that pornography? See, we had a bill last year that finally got passed that allows parents a cause of action, so that if a pornography site does not properly verify the end user of their product in the state of Idaho through age verification, right? And a child makes its way onto their site and the parent finds out about it, you can sue the pornography distributor, right? Because they're the ones that should have checked whether or not what they were delivering was age appropriate, right? So like if you walk into a business, right? If you walk into a store to buy a dirty magazine, the person, and you're a child, the person's going to not give it to you, or they're going to card you and make sure you're over the age so you can buy that dirty magazine. And if they do it, who do you sue? You sue the business if they did that, right? They're the ones that are being held liable. That's it's actually a criminal charge, right? Do you sue the owner of the building if they're leasing the building, or the owner of the land? Right? Do you sue the manufacturer of the newsstand, the news rack? Who made that news rack that pornography was sitting upon? Right? I mean, it sounds like I don't think I'm too far off on the analogy here, right? So that bill passed, and so we have that in Idaho. And so now he wants, should there be yeah, you should put filters on here. But there's other arguments. Let's listen to Senator they're better than what I'm making here. Let's watch Senator Brandon Shippey's argument.
I will be opposing the motion. I want to say I appreciate the comments from Senator Anthon. I agree that the right to view or distribute pornography is not a constitutionally protected right. I think that is a bad opinion if that's the opinion that's being held by anybody. My issue is that this does infringe upon the activities of business with a net zero outcome. I agree with many of what the testifiers have stated today, and I appreciate a lot of the testimony that we heard this morning. Pornography is a poison in our nation and in our state. It is destructive to marriages, to families, and I think something needs to be done. Something needs to be done. It is destroying our communities. I just don't believe this is the solution. As a father of 3 children I experience often don't tell the truth. And so for them to be trusted to tell the truth about their age on this, they easily would get around this. It only applies to the native browser. I don't think this is even a small step toward fixing the problem. I think this is, we're in a torrential downpour, and this is using a credit card to shield yourself from the rain, and it's just not going to accomplish anything. So I will be a no on the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, folks. I'm sorry, because after just going through what we did earlier in the program, talking about protecting our children, we want actual solutions. We want actual solutions. The idea of using a credit card to protect yourself from the rain, it's an interesting analogy. I never heard that one before. I like it. I'm going to use it going forward. But Senator, there was some testimony. There was some testimony from the people who showed up in support. Here's somebody who had an interesting point in opposing the bill as well. Let's listen to that.
Great. John Decker, I'm a senior fellow at the Parkview Institute. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony against Senate Bill 1158, the Children's Device Protection Act. While the intent of this bill to protect minors from harmful content is laudable, the proposed legislation ensures pragmatically that it would do the exact opposite. It also poses an inescapable constitutional concern due to its unintended restrictions on free speech. The private marketplace for content filtering is robust, with numerous companies dedicated to developing content filtering software and parental tools. They compete, innovate, and continuously improve their products to better address evolving challenges in online safety. SB 1158, therefore, is short-sighted in its approach, which would serve as a disincentive to this private marketplace, and it also creates new barriers to entry or expansion for those who are already most specialized in providing these sort of services, as it shifts significant market power over to hardware manufacturers. This backwards approach to child safety risks reducing investment that will protect children and instead enforces an unrealistic demand that hardware manufacturers be a jack of all trades in an entirely different market. Furthermore, the bill's definitions are overly broad and ambiguous, rendering them too vague to be enforceable or complied with, even with the best of intentions. Any attempt to fully restrict internet content that can, in the loosest terms, be considered obscene would result in internet access akin to that of North Korea if it could be done at all. Considering the level of content restriction that could, under these vague definitions, be required, the only honest conclusion one can draw is that this bill would lead to the blocking of innumerable pieces of media that are entirely legal, thereby depriving individuals of their First Amendment rights. The losers of this bill would be every Idaho resident who would have to forfeit more of their right to free speech, and the only winners would be trial lawyers who would have some ambitious excuse to harass American device manufacturers anytime they locate content deemed too obscene. And I would also that the other winner of this bill would be pornography websites, including those non-compliant with your age verification law. They could wind up benefiting as well, as they would now have a legal framework to shift blame and legal liability onto someone else.
If you could wrap up.
Thank you for your time.
That's it there. I mean, this just creates this is just a boon for lawyers, you know? I mean, and the reason why, and this is going to be my argument. I mean, all those different points there aside, this is my argument. It gives you a false sense of security. It gives you a false sense of security. If you are going to go buy your phone for your child, and they say, "Hey, we have to put the parental filter on it so that there's no inappropriate stuff for the child." You're like, "Great, yeah, throw it on there. I'm giving it to my kid," and then you walk away thinking that the phone is protected. They passed a law in Idaho: all phones that are given to kids will protect them from pornography. That is simply not true. That's like putting a mask on your face to protect yourself from an airborne virus. You think you're doing something, but it does nothing, because there's all sorts of different ways for those viruses to get in you, right? There's all sorts of different ways for a phone that only has a filter on the internet browser. There's all sorts of apps. There's all sorts of ways to get onto the internet in the phone. And that, giving parents a false sense of security, is a huge, huge problem. And I use COVID as an example. You can use COVID as an example. People had a false sense of security. Older people thought all they had to do was put on a mask and they can go about their day out in the wild. And then they caught COVID, and then they ended up dead because they thought the mask would save them when they should have just stayed home. Or if they were sick and they're like, "Well, I'm wearing a mask so I can go outside." No, you stay home when you're sick so you don't spread the disease. You don't just put on a mask and go outside and go to work. You stay home so you don't spread the disease. How many times have you been ready to go out to a party and you come down with something, you're like, "Oh, I shouldn't go. I'll get everybody sick." It's the same thing here. You don't just give them something with one little filter on one little app on the phone. Senator Ben Taves is a warrior in this field of protecting children. And he had an emotional testimony or emotional comment that he gave during the hearing today. Let's watch it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is probably one of the issues that is the most important to me. I've seen the devastation that pornography brings, and I have 5 children. This summer I'll have 3 teenagers, So this is a very real issue to me. I'm a big advocate for solutions, but, and I've said this before, I believe that real problems deserve real solutions. And I don't believe that this is a real solution. And it's unfortunate because I respect the sponsor. I respect the pro tem and his comments. But what I'm afraid of and what I think is the reality is that this is more of a paper tiger. If parents believe for a second that this legislation protects their children when they hand them a phone, we are doing the parents of Idaho a great disservice. Parents, don't give your kids phones. Just don't give them the phone. The reality is that to the degree that they believe that this will keep pornography away from their kids, I think it'll do more harm than it does good. I don't care about the whole constitutional talking about that. I don't think that that's a huge issue here. I think that the bigger problem is that if we want to keep this stuff out of the reach of our children, we need federal solutions. We need it to be more than state solutions. I don't know the next steps to do that, but I heard you. I heard all of your testimony. It's a really important subject. I really want a real solution. I will do anything I can to get to the best solution possible. Thank you.
It's hard to argue with that, folks. It's hard to argue with that. And he's right. You don't give him the phone. You don't, for all sorts of various reasons, not just pornography, but just, social skills, right? I don't know how many parents I know that have their kids in public schools or teachers that I know or volunteers and stuff that say, during lunch hour or recess, the kids that do have phones and that are allowed to bring them to school and stuff, like everybody goes out there and they're all just sitting down looking at their phone. They're not running around. They're not playing. They're not interacting with each other. And the ones that are off in a corner with the phone, who knows what they're looking at? You don't give them the phone. There is a phone out there and this isn't a pitch for them. They're not a sponsor or anything, but there is a phone out there that I've heard of called the Pinwheel phone. And it's a device that has been created specifically for children so that parents can get in touch with them for emergency situations, and also some light entertainment and communication. But I think that's great. I think that's where the market is. We have to leave this type of solution up to the market when it comes to the actual device. The content itself, that is the responsibility of the content makers. You should not be letting your stuff get into the hands of children. And if parents find out that their children have this stuff, then they should have a cause of action against the content creators or the distributors. And that's the law that we have now in Idaho. So, this bill gives people a false sense of security, and it also opens up the door for legal challenges later on when people want to sue gun manufacturers when a loved one is murdered by a gun. They say, well, who made that gun? Oh, Smith & Wesson made that gun? Okay, we're going to go sue Smith & Wesson because that maniac used a gun to kill my loved one. Come on. That's not what we're doing here. We cannot be going down that road.